This talk was given by Roshi Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
Okay, good. So, an earlier version of this teisho appeared as a chapter in an earlier book of mine, Before Buddha Was Buddha, Learning from the Jataka Tales, published by Wisdom Publications in 2017. This is an update, very definitely, of that chapter in relation. The good news is practice matures, and what was, how does that go? Last year's practice was not yet genuine. Last year, there was room for a gimlet, an awl. This year, I can't even find the awl. AWL, not ALL. Last year's realization or practice was not yet genuine. Last year, there was still room for an awl, something to punch a hole in things. This year, I can't even find that awl. And I remember Dana Roshi telling me when he was at a Diamond Sangha teacher circle some years back, Nelson brought up a question about a particular koan. Dana gave a response completely accurately. And Nelson said, "Oh, Dana, that was last year's answer." He had to come up with a fresh one on the spot. He said, fortunately, he was sharp that day and he was able to do it. But last year's answer won't do. It has to be right now. That's the good news. The good news is, as we continue on, it is. Otherwise, we're living with a memory of realization and practice. Let's have it in this book. So we'll start with the Buddha, but not the Buddha as a finished product. Instead, we'll look at an odd tale, and it is, believe me, a Jataka. This is a particularly odd one, or past life story of the Buddha, held by tradition to have been told by the Buddha himself as his parinirvana, or death, approach. It shows him making efforts and mistakes. The telling of this tale looks to have been part of a final compassionate effort on his part to encourage his Sangha as death approached. So he never stopped teaching, even as death was approaching. He was thinking of others. So a little bit of Jataka background. Traditionally, the Buddha is held to be the narrator of all the Jataka tales. These are past life stories of his own many lifetime journey towards complete and perfect enlightenment. He's said to have told them to reveal and resolve issues in his Sangha, as well as to encourage and inspire his followers in their own practice. They were canonical within 100 years of the Buddha's death, but did not appear as written text until almost 500 years later, 400 Common Era. Actually almost 800 years later, almost 800 years after the Buddha's death. So the stories became immensely popular. No, let's see. That's about right. The stories became immensely popular in all Buddhist countries, every one. Scholar, Italian, Giuseppe Tucci, who was traveling in pre-communist Tibet, recounted in one of his books of his absolute astonishment at seeing the roughest sort of men, Tibetan caravaneers and mule drivers, breaking down and weeping like babies when Jatakas were told around their campfires at night. These were tough guys, and these stories just floored them. While many of the oral tales have been lost, two textual strands survive: the Pali Jataka of 547 and the 34 stories of the much more purposefully inspirational and deeply influential Mahayana collection, which was in Sanskrit, not Pali, which is the Jatakamala, which means the garland or rosary of Jatakas. A mala is, a rosary. And this is attributed to Aryasura. Fragments of Jatakas exist as well in Nepalese texts, in Scythian Khotanese verses, as in sutras and related works, as well as appearing as carvings and paintings at such monumental Buddhist sites is the Ajanta Caves, Sanchi, Dunhuang, Lungmen, Borobudur, and others. So this is a retelling of an odd Jataka. It's almost like a science fiction story. It's very brief. And it's the Mandata Jataka, which is number 258 in the Pali collection of 547 such tales. It goes like this. Long ago in the early ages of the world, so far back now there is no way of computing it, there lived a king named Mahasamata who had a son named Roha, who had a son named Varaha, who had a son named Kalyana, who had a son named Varakalyana, and Varakalyana had a son named Upasta, and Upasta had a son named Mandata. When grown, Mandata was so great a monarch, he could make a rain of jewels fall from a clear blue sky simply by clenching his left hand into a fist and touching it with his right. For 84,000 years, he was the prince of the land. For 84,000 years, he helped his father, the king, rule. For another 84,000 years, he was king, ruler of the world. His glorious life lasted for ages, its radiance and majesty undimmed. One day, he found he could not satisfy some desire. What that was is now impossible to say. All we know is that for the first time in all those thousands and thousands of years, he experienced discontent. Remember, this is a Buddha, the Buddha, in a past life. What ails you, Lord? Asked an attendant, seeing frown lines forming on that great monarch's face. My merit is great, said the king. No one's is greater. Yet I find that I am no longer satisfied. Is there some realm better than this, more worth the desiring? Do you know? Heaven, Lord, answered the attendant. There it is said, all desires are fulfilled and no one is dissatisfied. But here on earth, truth be told, we face much that is barely tolerable. If heaven is best, said Mandata, that's where I must go. Gathering a retinue, off he went in his great spinning wheel of empire, rising up and up until he reached the starry heaven of the four great celestial kings. The four great kings of heaven, bearing celestial flowers, perfumes, and jeweled robes, attended by a company of shining gods, welcomed Mandata. Showering him with heavenly delights, they showed him the wonders of their heaven. Then, in recognition of his immense store of merit, they gave him rule over it as well as over themselves. And he was happy. And for many long ages, he remained so. Perfectly happy. Perfectly content. For ages. Can you imagine that? Perfectly happy and perfectly content for ages. But then, after long ages had passed, and remember, a day in heaven may equal many hundreds or thousands of years on earth, there came a time when he could not satisfy some desire. Big or small, what it was, who can say? Lines of frustration appeared on his brow. His mouth assumed a downward curve. Is this it, then? Is this all? Is this the best? He asked. Is there nothing more? Oh, no, my lord, answered the four great celestial kings. Compared to those who dwell above us in the heaven of the 33, we are like servants or common working men. There's no comparison at all. That realm is more perfect, more beautiful, and splendid by far. I cannot believe I've not known this until now, exclaimed Mandata in surprise. Then I must go there. Farewell. And with his court around him, he again set the wheel of empire spinning and ascended to the heaven of the 33. There, Chakra, king of the gods, surrounded by great gods of magnificent beauty and splendor, welcomed Mandata, giving him all he desired. But Mandata's eldest son, saluting his father, took the wheel of empire and descended back to the realms of men, and came again to his own city, while his father Mandata stayed on happy, very, very happy to be in the glorious heaven of the 33, where all desires are fulfilled. chakra himself, pleased by that great king's delight, gave him half of that shining kingdom to rule alongside him. And so they ruled together in splendor and joy. 30 million years, that's earthly years, they ruled. Then that chakra was born from the world of the gods, back to this earth, and another chakra arose and ruled in that high heaven alongside the undying earthly king, Mandata, the Buddha, in a past life. In this way, 36 chakras came and went, and countless world ages rolled by, while Mandata, still in his own human body, ruled on beside each successive chakra in that perfectly heavenly realm. Then a desire arose in Mandata's mind, and this desire we do know. It was the desire to rule there by himself alone. Why should I share this splendid heaven, he thought. Why not fulfill my desire and do as I please? I have outlived 36 or 35 chakras. I should be rid of this current one, the 36. For what is he but another in an endless line of such kings of the gods? And I should rule on my own. I desire it. I will fulfill my desire. And with that single self-centered thought, the power of unending life in him began to fade. Quickly, old age seized him. As a human body cannot die or disintegrate in heaven, he fell back to earth, like a meteor burning across the night, landing in a park, living but very, very old and very, very weak, ancient as dust. A gardener, having seen this fiery descent, ran to where the burning star fell. But instead of a star, he was surprised to find an old, old man, wearing glittering jewels and a robe of shining gold. At once the gardener set off to alert the royal family. Quickly they came and gathered around the old king, for such they saw he must be. Mandata, opening his rheumy eyes, looked upon those gathered around him, king and queen, princes, princesses, and nobles. Mandata am I, he said, king of kings. I ruled the great earth in my time. Then I ruled in both lower and higher heavens for the lifetimes of 36 chakras. What can you know of that? It is too many years to begin to count. Now I die, but desire outlives me. There is no end to it. This I know for myself and for sure. I have gone the limit. No one can go further in attempting to satisfy desire, but it shall not be so forever. I will return to this our Saha world, our bearable, challenging world, where effort leads to liberation, and work to be free of desire, no longer its slave, but its master. And with that, the great monarch Mandata, who had been king of kings, not only here on earth, but in heaven, the Buddha himself, in a distant past life, passed from that existence to fare on, as the Jataka say, according to his own thoughts and deeds. So now let's look at this from the perspective of our own practice. Traditionally, Buddhists think of the Buddha, and again, if you need to move, then do so mindfully. If you need to alleviate pressure or something painful, just do it attentively, carefully, and then resume a sitting position, whatever is comfortable for you. Traditionally, Buddhists think of the Buddha as the paragon of all goodness, wisdom, and virtue. Yet the depth of the Bodhisattva vow revealed by Jataka tradition shows that it took even him countless lifetimes to fulfill his aspiration to awaken fully and be of benefit to all. Like us, he matured by keeping at it. Falling down and getting back up can be the essence of the way. A more complex version of this Jataka appears in the Divyavadna, a collection of avadana, or noble giving, past life stories of the Buddha and other great practitioners of the Buddha's time. Additionally, in that version, we learn that this story was told by the Buddha at or near the time of his parinirvana or death. So brief and odd as it is, as the last or among the very last Jatakas he ever told, it gains in poignancy and depth. Its very briefness reminding us that these are potentially close to deathbed words. It's brief, because by then his every breath counted. At that emotionally charged time, in that more complex version of the tale, the Buddha offers this teaching. In a previous time, Ananda, I was filled with attachment, with hate, and with delusion, and wasn't liberated from birth, old age, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, suffering, grief, or despair. However, experiencing the presence of death, I delivered a sermon on karma, such that many hundreds of thousands of beings left behind the household life and went forth as seers would do. Then, by way of illustration, he tells this Mandata Jataka. But in the story as it appears in the Pali Jataka collection, which is the basis of our version, he does not address many hundreds of thousands of beings, but only a small group. However, given the 2,500 years since this Jataka was first told, who knows how many, having heard or read it, were able to one degree or another leave off self-centered living. The numbers may add up. And what is the message that so affected them? Zen teachers might put it simply as, keep going. The Buddha is said to have counseled as regards the spiritual life, there are only two errors you can make. One is not starting. The other is not continuing all the way. One is not starting. The other is not continuing all the way. In our time, this has resurfaced as one mistake would be not starting and the other not continuing, which is clever, but it misses the deeper point. Going all the way means not being satisfied with small gains or minor insights, but continuing all the way to full enlightenment, which is the potential of each of us. The point of the Buddha's teaching, after all, is liberation. Liberation. For him, it was realization of enlightenment that resolved the terrors of impermanence. This remains the core of where Zen takes its stand, actual realization. The Buddhist teaching affirms that enlightenment is the birthright of us all, while its realization will require faith, commitment, effort. It is not reserved for those with special talents or virtues, as the Buddha's personal realization of complete enlightenment confirmed. Nor was the Buddha a novice in going all the way, as classic Jatakas like the tigress, the banyan deer, the brave parrot, and others all show. He also personally knew about errors, as Jatakas like this one of the great King Mandata make clear. There are others in which the Buddha not only reveals past mistakes, but even his past failures. However, by unashamedly exposing his past challenges, these tales become not simply stories of long ago eras, but encouragements to us now in our own, sometimes faltering efforts. Whatever we may be going through right now, Jataka suggests that the Buddha too faced these issues and had himself to work on them. This is great encouragement. I don't know about you, but I find that tremendously encouraging, that a teacher of the Buddhist stature reveals his errors, failures even. Really makes it clear he was just a human being like all of us, but he kept trying, he persisted, he did not give up. While our own maturing is not likely to result in jewels streaming from the sky or in millions of years of heavenly rule, Nonetheless, like Mandata, we certainly will find desire and its satisfaction, or the lack thereof, a thorny issue, of which the Rolling Stones classically complained, I can't get no. Give the self what it desires, and soon it wants more. Though we work to fill ourselves to the brim quickly enough, we feel deficient again. Must we wait till we're stretched on our deathbeds, like Mandata, before we realize that something is fundamentally wrong? The Buddha hoped not, and seems to have told this Jataka in a final effort to rouse his Sangha and future Sanghas to awake beyond the unconscious self-centered habits that cause not only personal dissatisfaction, but communal, national, and planetary disaster. The good news is that what we truly seek is much closer than what we believe or dream. It is not out there. It is the very ground we look out from. The Buddha's telling of this personal tale was an act of compassion. For our lasting benefit, he revealed how he himself had been caught by desire, but that realizing that, seeing where it led, changed and matured him. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. That's from William Blake's Proverbs of Hell, and the marriage of heaven and hell. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. In this past life as King of Kings, the Buddha seems to have had no regrets about his millions of years of error. He did what he needed to do, found out what he needed to find out, and moved on. He didn't wallow in self-pity or beat himself up for having wasted precious time. Like some scientist whose experiment arrived at its clear conclusion, like some ancient Picasso whose blue period has passed and now reaches for other colors, the Buddha's attitude seems to have been, I now personally know that this road doesn't lead where I want to go. Feeding desire cannot lead to contentment or happiness any more than drinking salt water can assuage thirst. I have gone the route. No one can go further. I personally know this to be true. It is time to move on. In classical accounts of the Buddha's efforts to realize enlightenment, there comes a time when he attempts to gain understanding through severe ascetic practices, finally subsisting on one single sesame seed a day. His body becomes a wreck, his mind a disaster. Looking back at this painfully self-destructive time, he says in a sutra, no one had gone further in ascetic practices. But I came to the end of that road and found it did not lead to liberation. Here he does the same, but the issue now is not punishing the self, but rather its opposite, trying to satisfy the self by fulfilling its desires. Essentially, this is hedonism, the opposite of asceticism, which he now explores. And by personally exploring these opposing paths, he demonstrates that neither total self-denial nor complete acquiescence to what our isolated sense of egotism desires can satisfy, thereby establishing the middle way. Fulfillment, the essence of the middle way, means being neither too tight nor too lax. A healthy working discipline, a well-tuned, satisfying practice of body-mind remains the point. The middle way is not wishy-washy, but balanced. The Buddha's teaching is a path to end suffering, not a way to reinvent or recreate it. While Zen practice can be challenging, at times even extremely frustrating, happiness, not persistent misery, is its aim. The Bodhisattva knows this for sure. How? Personal experience. He has the mind of an explorer, a pathfinder, artist, or scientist, breaking new trail to find out for himself whether a promising route leads to where he wants to go or not. How encouraging to discover that as for the Buddha, mistakes, our own mistakes, remain a fundamental path to maturing. Roshi Kapleau used to say, as long as we are doing our best, no sincere effort is ever wasted. Now, an eerie thing about this story remains its extraordinary view of time and space. Millions of years go by as the Bodhisattva continues to reign in heaven in a human body. How weird is that? And given that vast length of time, what kind of earth had he left? I mean, did dinosaurs roam beyond the palace walls? Was the city he came from in India or Atlantis? As we peer down into the dark backward and abysm of time, and upwards to where heavens are piled upon heavens, immense vistas of time and space open to us in this odd little tale. Plus, what's with that wheel of empire in which Mandata travels to the heavens? It seems suspiciously like some UFO or UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena as they're known these days. And actually, aerial cars or flying machines in which devas or gods fly around and visit our world to hear the Buddha's teachings are mentioned in sutras. There's even a Jataka, number 159 in the Pali Jataka, in which the Buddha is a talking peacock who, captured by a human king, revealed that in a distant past life, he had been an even greater human king than the human king who's captured him. Sic transit gloria mundi. Prove it, says the astonished human king. Then the Bodhisattva, the Buddha in that past life, tells the king to drain the lake beside his palace. For, once drained, he says, they'll find the jeweled flying machine he used to fly around in that distant past life, buried in the mud of the lake bottom. Dutifully, the lake is drained, and lo and behold, an ancient jeweled flying machine is uncovered. Curiouser and curiouser, says Alice. Speaking of Wonderland, whatever may have taken place in the distant past on our Earth, our understanding of our planet's history remains obscured by the rise and fall of mountains, the shifting of continents, the drying and flooding of seas. Everything, beings, worlds, galaxies, universes, Buddhist teachings tell us, come and go, with neither beginning nor end. Aryasura, author of the influential Jatakamala, however, states that something does persist. He writes, earth with its forests, noble mountains and seas, may perish 100 times by fire, water, and wind, as each eon comes to an end. But the great compassion of a Bodhisattva, never. Earth with its forests, noble mountains and seas, may perish 100 times by fire, water, and wind, as each eon comes to an end. But the great compassion of a Bodhisattva, never. That's from the great Ape Jataka in Once the Buddha Was a Monkey, a book of recent translation of the Jatakamala. According to Buddhist tradition, the aspiration to awaken and live so as to benefit all beings is woven into the nature of reality, is the nature of original unself-centered mind. Given this, the effort we put into trying to satisfy a small, self-centered, fundamentally illusory habitual narrative of isolated selfness with which we identify as myself, must meet with defeat. With this little Jataka, the Buddha reveals that he himself had trod that selfish trail to its necessary end. And having gone the route at trail's end, he's put up a marker for all to see. Warning, you can never satisfy desire. If he's right, and this is true, and not a specific tenet of Buddhist belief, we should expect to find it in the stories and wisdom traditions of other cultures as well. And indeed we do. Perhaps you remember the Grimm's brothers' so-called fairy tale. Fairy tales it's a misnomer. There are no fairies in fairy tales. They tend to be really stories of cause and effect. They tend to reveal karma. If I do this, this is likely to happen. If I do that, that's likely to happen. What is it I want to have happen in my life? And fairy tales typically show where kindness, good humor, respect for living things tends to put the lost princess back on the throne, and selfish mentalities, greed, anger, ignorance, selfishness, cruelty, meanness, lack of respect for life, tend to take the person that's on the throne and throw them in a barrel full of nails. So the question is, where do you want to end up? And they basically show cause and effect. Fairy tales are not cute little kiddie stories. They're pretty stern stuff. In any case, there's a fairy tale called The Fisherman's Wife from the Grimm's brothers. Perhaps you remember it. If not, here's a synopsis. With one caveat, please hold off criticisms about the narrative's misogyny. Yes, the wife is cast as the villain, but if we pay attention, we may see that there's more to her than first meets the eye. So the tale. Once a poor fisherman hooked a flounder, a bottom-feeding fish, and hauled it up from the depths of the blue sea. The flounder speaks, saying that it's really an enchanted prince, and then begs so pitifully for its life that the man, moved to compassion, releases it. Interesting about it's really an enchanted prince. If you know anything of the Northwest Coast indigenous peoples, often there'll be like a raven mask that opens up and you see a human face in there. Or there'll be an octopus mask and in the head there'll be a little human figure. And the sense of, I have when I was up speaking in Alaska many years ago, in our living room, there's a little, it's a kind of whale hunting fetish, because peoples up there were whale hunters. And you can see the body of the whale, and it's surrounded by this hoop, which includes paddles and a harpoon and two hands, human. So it's in a circle of human activity. But on the back of the whale is a little inwa, a human face, indwelling spirit. So this thing of like the flounder being really an enchanted prince, it's really a very ancient, it seems to be almost Paleolithic realization that all beings have one common nature. Even a fish isn't really a fish, it's one mind, it's Buddha nature. There's something much more being a fish. There's something much more being a sparrow. There's something much more being a tree. There's so much more being each of us. The San, the Bushmen of the Kalahari, have a saying, there is a dream dreaming us. I'm really an enchanted prince. I'm not really a fish. It's a really wonderful insight and has deep import. It just happens to show up in this fairy tale, like often in not a fairy tale. In any case, I'm really an enchanted prince, so please, let me go. And the fisherman does. But when he gets home and he tells his wife, she's furious. You fool! If it spoke, it was a magic fish. Go back and tell it that it owes us and should fulfill our wishes. I want a nice cottage to live in instead of this little hovel. So the fisherman returns to the shore of what's now a turgid sea and calls for the flounder. It rises to the surface, hears her request, and says, her wish is granted. He goes home and he finds his wife waiting at the door of a nice little cottage. Well, time moves on, and soon the wife says, "Go back to the flounder. How can we be satisfied with such a meager place? Tell it we want something more splendid." Back he trudges to the shore, calls, and when the flounder hears his request, it says she has what she wants and she wants home. Sure enough, he finds they now live in a palace. Well, you can see what's coming. In short order, the wife becomes king, and they live in a more splendid palace. But even that, too, it's not enough. So she becomes emperor, lives in a palace of gold. Phooey! That can't even do. It can't be enough. It can't be all. So she becomes pope, which for her meant being spiritual director of the world. But how can such limited achievement or fulfillment satisfy? Impossible! And one day she sees the sun shining, the clouds moving across the sky, the moon glowing and stars sparkling at night, and she says, "Go back to the flounder and tell it I want to be God Almighty, the one who makes the clouds fly, the wind blow, the sun and moon rise and set." Oh, the fisherman goes back to the shore, but he is frightened now. The once clear blue sea is dark and foul, the wind howling chaotically, polluted waves slamming against the rocks. Though his heart pounds and pounds, he calls for the flounder, and when it rises from the sea, he stammers out his awful request. Wham! Next thing he knows, he's back at their original cabin, his wife standing in the doorway just like it was when they'd begun. Only perhaps now like Mandata, the Buddha in a past life, having discovered for themselves that no matter how much we get, desire is still desire, and its nature is never to be satisfied, they might begin to seek genuine happiness. So there it is, the Buddha's wisdom in a European fairy tale. Now, what about that wife? In the Grimm's tale, she's a relentless egotist, and yet, come on, we have to hand it to her. She had the guts to go the route and do what, given half a chance deep down perhaps, we'd all want, if we only dared, to desire it all, claim it all, declare openly, unrestrained by any social niceties, "I want it all." Blake himself wrote, more is the cry of a mistaken soul. Less than all cannot satisfy." More is the cry of a mistaken soul. Less than all cannot satisfy. That's from his piece, There Is No Natural Religion. The Buddha owned only a robe and a begging bowl, yet he was said to be the richest man in the universe. Why? Deep bows to the fisherman's wife who bravely took the fall for us all and compassionately opened the way. Like Mandata, the Buddha in that past life, she demonstrates where desiring leads or doesn't. By the way, get this. One of the 33 forms or transformations traditionally said to be taken by Kannon, Bodhisattva of compassion, is, you guessed it, a fisherman's wife. One of the traditional forms of the Bodhisattva of compassion is a fisherman's wife. According to classical Buddhist tradition, an unimaginably deep past lies behind each of us. A journey of who knows how many lifetimes has brought us to where we are right now. With this moment comes a renewed opportunity to commit to the living present, become freer of self-centered desire, and through attention to the count, the breath, the koan, let a million anxious searching years fall away. The smell of incense, the sound of footsteps, the ting of the bell, the drip of rain, the vroom of traffic, the caw of the crow, says it all. Whatever comes, we let it enter claim us, and wipe away a million years of tears. As the old song says, happiness lies right under your eyes, back in your own backyard. And this is so, not necessarily because of what's there, but paradoxically, because of what isn't. Indeed, because of what never truly was. And because this is so, we too can realize the essential truth of our own nature. And going forward from wherever we currently are, in wisdom, in compassion, in effort, in fortitude, in perseverance, in faith, in focus, release whatever we presently cling to and take yet another step forward, following the path the Buddha opened to us long, long ago. Now we'll stop here and we will recite our great vows for all.